Welcome to Breakthrough the Ordinary podcast. Are you ready to commit to your future self? If you are, sibling duo Marc and Claudine Chiarmonte will take you on a journey of self-discovery through impactful conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. We are here to share practical strategies and tools to generate the life you envision. New episodes drop every Monday.
And we're real happy to have Gia Mallardi. I hope I'm saying that right. She's a proud mom of a 14-year-old boy, stepmom of two amazing mid-20-year-olds, and a loving co-guardian of an aspiring chef and college freshman. She has been interacting with kids in her personal life for many years. Her journey as a professional kid coach started several years ago while peeling back the layers of her own personal transformation. Through working with children, she organically started coaching parents too. She has a vast experience and extensive training to be able to support your family wherever you need help, whether for healing, learning effective communication, or how to teach each family member to become accountable in word and deed, which I love. She is a certified kid coach through Adventures in Wisdom, a certified mindfulness instructor through Mindful Schools, and a certified parent coach through the Gia Institute for Parenting. And she is certifiably passionate about what she does.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that will become apparent today because you're into many things and very passionate about families.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh, you've created that.
I'm just repeating who you are.
Yes. Right? And for me, I'm fascinated with parent coach, child coach, family coach, this idea. And perhaps you could share with our listeners, what's been your journey? How did you, I heard peeling back layers, but what brought you to this space at this time in your life?
Yeah, so I started on my own transformational training, I'd say about 8 years ago. And through that, I did start peeling back layers of just who I was as a person, a woman, and as a mom. And it actually took me 12 years to have my son. So it was a journey in and of itself, just becoming a mom. And I feel so blessed that actually my dream did come to fruition. And so I was busy being mom for many years. And through this transformational training, people kept telling me, you're so great with kids, you're so great with kids. But I kept thinking, I just want to be with my kid. I just was kind of like in this bubble. But the more I thought about what I was going to do now that I had a child, at that time, I think he was 7, maybe going on 8. Who was I becoming? I was so mom for so many years that I was losing sight of who I was and where I wanted to take my life. So I started opening up to the idea of actually working with kids, because I did recognize that I was pretty good at it, and just wanted to keep getting more and more involved so that I would become a better parent. So that's when I started researching. And I did start with the mindfulschools.org. They have several different courses that you can enroll in. And so I enrolled in almost all of them and became certified as a mindfulness instructor first. Do you want me to just continue with the... Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So then I worked with kids in I did a lot of after school work at my son's school. And thankfully, they were very open to it. So I got to do that. And then I started going into the classrooms and talking with the kids. And then it started segueing into, well, I want to do more. So I came across this Adventures in Wisdom kid coaching. And so I went through that program and became certified as a kid coach. Which I'll probably talk a little bit more as we go through maybe some more questions. And then last year when the pandemic hit, I'm like, okay, where do I go next? And so I thought, well, let me get I was already coaching parents too. It just kind of goes hand in hand with working with children. And I found the Gia Institute for Parenting. And that was a 6-month program, and I became officially certified as a parent coach as well. So that's a little bit of the overview.
Thank you. I just want to interject for our listeners. I know Gia. Gia and I actually did our transformational journey, one of many in both our lives, but one that really had a significant impact. And I love that your child's name, because I have met your child, also represents the experience you had. And I actually never had that until just now.
Really?
It never occurred to me. You said, the journey of becoming a parent, right, was 12 years for you. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's the inspiration for the name.
Yeah. My son's name is Journey. To me, there was no more, it was a perfect name for him. He's my journey.
Yeah. And continues, I bet you, even not just his arrival, but his course of life.
Absolutely.
Journey too.
For good and for bad.
They are a journey for sure.
Yeah. I just had my aha moment.
I can't believe that. I figured you knew that. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, good.
It's beautifully symbolic. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Can you give us maybe a distinction between parent coach and child coach? Because I've never heard those terms actually. So could you give us a...
So with children, it's a little bit different when you coach them, because you don't sit back and expect them to figure out the answers on their own, which is typically what you do when you're working with an adult. So with kids, it's more of, I might as well talk about it. Adventures in Wisdom is actually coaching kids through storytelling. So with getting my certification, I got a huge curriculum of material that are organized in skill books for like me power, inner power, dream power. And so these different skill books, you can read the stories and then you talk about the message in the story. And that way, first of all, children remember stories really well. And they become engaged because I'm reading a story and then I'm coaching through the message in that story. So it typically lands for them. And then, of course, with parent coaching is the same thing as adult coaching, generally. A lot of times we have to go through how we're showing up as a person to really figure out how we're actually showing up as a parent. And sometimes you don't really like what you see when you start looking inward and seeing how you're showing up as a person, and then seeing, okay, my kid is seeing this. So however I'm showing up is what he's going to see, whether it's just engaging with a friend or a partner or, engaging with the child as their parent. So it's, I guess that's...
So I'm curious too. So let's just take I know overall, so you're clearly a family coach with either way of entering the system, but I want to just go to the child coaching for a moment. Okay. So you shared with us that there's these stories, which I agree, right? When a child can show up as, I'm going to use the word expert, or like, oh, I could see that, or they can see that in there, but maybe not in them.
Right.
How do you help understand what it is that the child, I don't even want to say struggle because it has a negative connotation, but what's coming up for them that let me build up the me power here, or, right? How does that assessment, is that, part of you and the parents creating that, or is there something you learned from the child that helps?
Yeah, that's a really great and insightful question, because you really do need to figure that part out, right? Because otherwise, stuff might not be landing for the child.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do is have a discovery call with the parent, and then I get a feel for what results they're looking for their child, which will then reflect in their family dynamics.
Okay.
And then I meet with the child. At the first meeting, I have a little, like a pie chart, and we score like how they feel about friendships, how they feel about school, how they feel about siblings. And so they rate. And so through that little chart, I start getting a feel for where the child might need some guidance. So between the two, collectively, I then decide where I want to go. And then as I meet with the child each time, I really start getting a feel for where I think they can benefit, what stories will really, really support them in where they want to go.
Yeah. If I just go a little deeper on that.
Well, yes. Of course.
So I'm sitting here, and I don't know, just out of curiosity, do you have an age group that you with kids?
Yeah. So the curriculum is really based for 6 or 7 to 12-year-olds. That's for me, that's like my sweet spot. I really liked getting them. I like getting them kind of young because 6 might be a little young unless they're really mature, but starting at 7, they really start getting it. They can really, they still love stories and they really get engaged with the story. Sometimes if they get a little distracted, which can happen, especially since we've been doing a lot on Zoom, I'll share the story. I'll have them read portions of it. So I find different ways to get them engaged. Sometimes I'll do something as simple as play hangman after the story. We'll do hangman but it'll be a message from the story. So I'm just kind of, solidifying what they learned that day, what I want them to, hang on to. So really I get to tap into some creativity because every child is different.
Yeah.
I literally had an 8-year-old boy once tell me, well, he seemed really distracted. This is when we were still meeting in person and we were at the library in a private room, but he was still kind of all over the place. And I said to him, "Are you bored?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm really bored." And I'm like, "Okay, thank you for being honest." I wanted him to really, I opened the space for him to tell me really how he was feeling. And I said, "Well, do you want to stop meeting? It's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to stop meeting." So really needed to gauge where he was at. And he said, "No, I don't want to stop meeting." And I'm like, "Okay, well then what can I do to make it more exciting for you or to make you want to really be engaged in what we're talking about more?" So he said, "I want to play games." So I started bringing board games to our sessions. And then through those board games, I would come up with messages, whether it was about, winning or competition or how to not get everything you want in life. I would always try to land some kind of message through even playing board games. So that's just an example of, getting creative as a kid coach because it's a completely different coaching than with an adult.
Yeah. I love that example. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, have you been, ever surprised by a child who, parents may say have their goals. I'm making that up, whatever they may be. Yeah. Listen more, go to bed when I tell them. Right. And then they come into a session and be like, I want you to have my parents get along better. I'm making this up again. But the idea that they too have a wisdom, but they haven't been asked.
Yeah, what is that expression? Out of the mouths of babes. So, sometimes you'll hear things and, my role as a coach is, being very non-judgmental, right? So I'm a parent too. And I know I've had my moments. I have them all the time. And whether it's just myself or whether it's, how I'm happen to be engaging with my partner at the time, whatever the case may be. So yes, that can and does happen. And, I work with it however it shows up and keeping it very non-judgmental and teaching the child, your parents are human too. And that's the beauty of being human. We make mistakes. And when we can own up to our mistakes, always turning it back into a lesson, when we can own up to our mistakes, when we can say, yes, I did that and I was wrong and I'm sorry, then you're also showing the child, I was wrong. I kind of lost my thought on what I actually wanted to say there. But yeah, kids will be children and it's fun and,
Sounds interesting. I remember reading a book. I think you were working for me at the time years ago. Wasn't it about the boy and play therapy and starting, working with kids. So it's great. Oh, so okay. We're in strange times, COVID, everything going on. I don't know if it's changed, but is there trends or trends in family and kids and dynamics that are going on that you tend to notice?
Yeah, this has definitely been, so challenging for both parents and children. And I would say screen time is probably the number one challenge that I hear about, even in my own home. So they were doing Zoom for almost a whole year, and we were already being challenged by kids wanting to be on the computers and phones, and we were already being challenged by it. And so now having to do school on Zoom, it just really intensified the addiction. It's an addiction. I don't like to, dance around it. It is an addiction. And so I would say screen time would be the number one. And then the motivation. Children just aren't as motivated because they spent almost a whole year, sometimes a whole year of school at home. I can recall my son, he started out the school year on Zoom last year. He would get up, get dressed, and then, have his breakfast, brush his teeth, just like he was going to school. And then by the end of him being on Zoom, online schooling, he was literally rolling out of bed, going straight to the computer and not even turning on the video, so that, but it was like, and he finally told me, so I have no motivation. I've lost all motivation. So now it's kind of as parents, we're like pivoting again to try to get them motivated and inspired to now be going into school and with masks and everything that entails. So I would say computer, number one, with trends. Motivation also is a big thing. And communication. It's always really, I think it boils down to communication more than anything.
Yeah. In using the idea of the changing times, because they're always changing times.
Yeah, that's true.
Is there things that any tips or strategies that you as a parent or as a family coach could suggest to our listeners to help our kids, I want to say, adjust to, respond effectively to uncertainty and shifts? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I've got, and this is really, we've got some great stories for through the Adventures in Wisdom program. There's one that's about change. It's called Managing Change. So that's a story, and there's different characters in each story. And so this one happens to be animal. The characters are animals. And so there's a cat, little kitty cat that's scared, a tortoise that's shy or sad. There's a grizzly bear that's angry, so he's mad. And then there's the rabbit. And the rabbit is excited. He loves change. So he's bouncing around like, oh my gosh, we get to go to this new town because their forest was being destroyed by a new developer that was coming in and clearing out their land. So it's a great story because every kid can relate to one or two of those characters. And if they approach change, this is even a great lesson for parents and adults. If we can approach change in more of an adventurous way, even though we know there are some real challenges, even in that adventure, then it's a whole different perspective. So manage that. That story is a great story. Then I've got a story about, this is one of my favorites, and the kids really respond to it too. It's called Canville and Cantville. And so one kid lives in Canville, and the other kid lives in Cantville. So they go through these conversations and doing things. And it's like, it just is a great story that lands every time. If kids want to hear another story, the same story, oh, we've gone through all the stories. Which one do you want to hear again? I want to hear Can and Cantville. They love it because they can really relate to it. And in their minds, the story, the message is like, are you living in Canville or are you living in Cantville? It's a very simplistic message, but one that they can keep remembering when they're in school or they're home or they're with their friends or whatever the case may be. So I like that one too.
I'm listening to that. I'm thinking parents could use the Canville
It's
too.
so true. I mean, these messages and these stories, the stories are written for kids, obviously, but the messages, it's a gift for me every time I read one because it's a great reminder for me. Like, where am I? Am I living in Cantville today? Like, why am I doing that? And, I say power shifting because there's another story about putting on your power goggles. So I can power shift out of that mindset at any time if I choose to. It's a lot about choice too. I teach the kids a lot about choice, and sometimes they want to reject that. Well, I can't help it. They're making me mad. It's not my choice. So then I get to really dig a little deeper with them and teach them that no, they can't make you anything. You're choosing to be mad. And do you want to stay mad? If you do, that's okay. And if you don't, then choose to power shift out of that mood and go to the whatever mood you do want to be in.
If we take the power shift mood for a moment, is there some, because I'm hearing mindset, I'm hearing choice. And I think when we think of pivoting, stepping left, right, they're great concepts. Do you also speak into like, what do they need? What resources do they need to put the power goggles on? Right? Because we could say that, like, just choose differently.
Right.
Like, right, I'm still having my experience. I'm ready to make it.
Right.
Right. And you know, I know it's also about communicating, right? So the parents also get to recognize the child still having his experience or vice versa. But is there any, strategies within that story or that you could suggest that help them pivot or choose differently?
It is a practice. As we all know, it's a practice. It's a continuous practice. So yes, it really, after every session with a child, I have we call them take-home sheets, but either I'll email them or hand them out for what they can do at home to really make sure that the message lands for the kids. So whatever story it is, it may have a different tool. But, I really preach a lot of affirmations. If a child is lacking self-love or self-confidence, really working on affirmations. And I've got some really fun songs on YouTube that are for kids for affirmations. Visualizing, they can visualize being, if they want to, let's say they want to, try out for the basketball team, and they don't think that they're short, let's say, and I'm probably not going to make it because I'm short. Well, there are a lot of great stories about basketball players who weren't really tall but were extremely successful. But visualize going to the tryouts, visualize making that basket, visualize the whole thing, and visualize your name on the list of kids who were chosen to be on the team. So affirmations and visualizations are really, I think, great tools.
Right. I love that. And I'm also hearing the sheet. So I agree, even for adults, right? We know that visualization and affirmations for us. And I'm hearing like there's also this integration that you provide to continue the landing.
Yes.
Of that. Do the parents, are they part of that worksheet? Like, will sit down, or is this like, here you go, child, this is yours and you get to read it on your own?
The parents get I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead. That's what's called listening to respond. We can talk about that after. Are you listening to respond, or are you actively listening? So I was ready to respond, and I
got you.
Okay. So anyway, the take-home sheets are actually for the parents.
Oh.
So they know what we did that day, and then they can implement strategies at home. So if they're not, that's a great point, Claudine, because if the parents aren't on the same page that I'm on, the kids are going to get this mixed signals and mixed messages, and then they're just going to resort back to whatever is happening at home, which maybe it was why the parent came to me to begin with. If the parent's not shifting along with the child. I can remember this is before I even became a coach, when my son was in first grade, the teacher pulled me aside and said, "Your son is very smart. I'd like to tell you, however, he takes a long time to do his work. Probably the longest out of any other child in the classroom." So I was like, where do I go with it? I'm still kind of a new mom, And she said, "I think it's because he wants it to be just right." And when she said that, I felt like I had been punched in the gut, because I knew that it was me. I knew that I was the perfectionist, wanting to always look right, always look good, always be in control. And I was teaching my son, maybe not with my words, but certainly by my actions. And that was a huge, huge event for me, where I then shifted. I'm like, you know what? I have to show him. I have to apologize. Every time I do something that I wish I had done differently, when he got in the car, be like, you're not going to believe what happened today, baby. This is what, can you believe mommy did this? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did it. Showing him messiness, showing him imperfection, showing him it doesn't always have to be right, but what you do about it afterwards is what really counts. So, yeah, that was a big one.
This is a big topic, and I want to continue on this. You're working with kids. Do you work at the same time with parents, or how do you know when to bring the parents in? Because you inferred to it earlier, and I have some of that same belief that if there's something going on with the kids, you need to look at the parents.
Yes.
So how do you bring them in? Do you bring them in? How do you gauge to bring them in, or do you work them both together at the same time, like, individually, but at the same time?
Right. So it can really go however it I got to just say, sometimes I'll get calls from parents, and while I'm on the discovery call with them, I'm thinking, I hear it. And from a non-judgment standpoint, I'm thinking, you're just wanting me to fix your child. There's nothing wrong with your child. I can't fix the child. And then I'm thinking, it might be you that I really need to be coaching. And sometimes I will even say that if I feel that I'm not going to offend them. Parenting is such a delicate topic as it is. So for a person to come to you, it's already, you get to be extremely mindful of how you speak to a parent. And so sometimes I'll end up coaching the parent first after that discovery call, and we'll see where we get with the parent. Sometimes I just start right with the child and then speak to the parent. I'll always do a follow-up with the parent, whether it's an email or a phone call, and tell them what I see and ask them to implement what I think might be effective in their household. Sometimes with kids that might be a little bit older, maybe they're tweens, that's when some of the static starts happening between the kids and the parents in a different way, because kids are really wanting to exert their independence. And parents, it's growing pains for both parents and kids, because the parents are like learning when to step in and when to step out. I still work on that, my son being 14. Sometimes I step in and it's like, I shouldn't be stepping in, but I'm just trying to learn when to step in and when not to. But long story short, to answer your question, with the tweens, sometimes if there's a specific issue, I'll call in the parent and we'll do a session together and try to work on acknowledging each person's role and how they're accountable for how they're showing up, and how, then implement the strategy and a plan. And then maybe meet with them again the next week to see how it's working. So sometimes it's just the child, sometimes it's just the parent, sometimes it's, both.
And I will say that languaging that you just use is very different than how it's often looked at in, either field of psychotherapy, educational lens. Like I often find that there's, right, it's your fault. And I use fault, blame, problem. You're like, someone's identified, but I'm hearing you use this language of a shared accountability, a shared contribution. And that in itself takes the guard down.
Right.
Like I can even feel it myself when you said that. I was like, that is a really great way to put it in any relationship, but
absolutely,
particularly with
right.
the balance of
coming from a place of accountability first and foremost is, it's difficult for us as adults, if I could speak for us all. I know I can speak for myself. When all your life all you've done is try to defend yourself, right? You're coming from a place of this armor because you feel you need to for some reason, fight or flight. We could go into a whole different conversation there, but allowing yourself to breathe, allowing yourself to say, okay, what can I do? Where am I showing up and how am I showing up, and what can I do better?
And along those that level, you had spoke earlier, like a lot comes down to communication. Even what you just said, right? We just said the shared, that languaging is even different. What would you say you can suggest as tips for parents to help, to foster effective communication, or to kids, but I'm going to go with the parents right now.
Okay.
To foster that good communication and the ebbs and flows of growth, right? That just naturally occur in life and development. But is there some principles that you'd say or tips that you would suggest for our listeners?
Yes, I think it's super important for parents to realize that children have their own experience. They're not parents. As parents, we think a lot of times we know best, but we might not know best. Yes, we don't want them to cross the street with traffic coming and things like that, like safety. But as far as, our child is their own person with their own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, their own perspective in life. And if we're trying to tell them how it is and assume we know, then we're never going to come together. We're never going to understand them because we're not trying to understand them. We're trying to tell them how to be. And we can't do that. We are not them. It's no different than me trying to tell you as an adult how to be. Mm-hmm. You have your own experience. So I think it's so important for parents to realize they're their own little people and to respect them as their own person. Allow them to have a voice. Oh my gosh, this is huge. If you're shutting down your child because you think you know better than them, they're going to grow up potentially thinking their voice doesn't matter, thinking that what they have to say isn't important. There's something called power parenting. There's over-parenting, under-parenting, and then empowered parenting. And so the goal with, overpower parenting is when you try to control your child, basically. And just, this is how it is. Now, I know that's pretty much how I grew up. And I know a lot of people in my generation, it's like, you just do it because I said so. There was no real, engagement or discussion. And when you power over a child, they do feel like they don't matter and that they maybe don't have a voice. When you power under the child, then you're disengaged. You're just like, either you've had it and you're over it and you're just going to let it go. And okay, at this point, I'm done. Or you're not engaged to begin with. And then the child, they need boundaries, they need guidance. So then they're going to grow up uncertain and indecisive. But empowered parenting is, the balance of allowing your child to be expressive, allowing your child to be heard, allowing your child to work through their emotions and not stifle them, along with guiding them along the way. Just, little by little to allow them at the end of the day to really see where they want to take it. So I don't know. There was a lot in there, but some good stuff. Yeah.
I had never heard it in that way of the overpower parenting, right? We call helicopter, but that idea of that, but really giving them the space to create for their own and find their voice. I like that empowered parenting.
And when you think about, like, when I just even read the description of what I could be, how my child could be affected by power over, I think, oh my gosh, I would never want my child to feel like, they don't have a voice or they don't matter. And so when I really think about how I could be affecting them, it really just puts it in perspective for me. It really just takes me back.
Yeah, I would think like you think about like, oh, how do you want your son or daughter to experience life? Like, do you want them to have a voice that they trust in themselves or not? Like, and the parents see that their contribution to it, not the cause, but like that is a very eye-opening way for a parent to view it. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
As you're talking, I'm trying to analyze my own parenting style.
Good. Yeah, that's great.
I'm definitely not a helicopter. I might be a little under, just a pair under, but pretty. I hope, I know my son has a voice and I don't, he can speak to me and he can call me out on stuff. And
he does.
Yes. And he does. And he's got his voice. He's powerful. Like, he's following I always, I've said it before. I believe they have their own guidance and their own spirit and they have a journey and very little guiding, just those certain, but mostly, or I'm blessed. I don't, a little bit of everything. But.
Yeah. Go ahead. No.
Go.
I was going to say, there's also something when you really think about when you're parenting from fear, and there's different ways that fear shows up. because you want your child to be safe, you want them, or you want them to be successful, or you want them to be healthy, whatever it is. If you really peel back your own parenting style and you think, if I'm parenting from fear, like I'll give you, for instance, the other night, my son just started high school. So we're all going through this transition, and he's staying up later. The homework is getting harder. He's not sleeping as much. He's not eating properly because he's in a rush in the morning. And we got into a really heated discussion. And in reflecting on it the next day, which of course I had a lot of mommy guilt about how I showed up in that conversation. It was like 11:30 at night and I was tired, no excuse, but that's what was going on. When I reflected back, I thought, I'm parenting from fear, and it's fear of his well-being. And so I can certainly express to him that I'm concerned about his well-being, but do it in a way that would be constructive and not destructive. So really always reflecting back as a parent, okay, maybe I didn't do it so great, but let me the next day apologize. Tell him I didn't do it so great. Tell him what I really wanted him to know. And then, start again.
So in this parent-child relationship, is there like the secret sauce? How would you start or give our listeners some ideas to create this open communication, this way of having a family that's open, that can talk and communicate?
I really am a firm believer in family meetings. Whether you do it. No. Yeah, whether you do it like monthly or I wouldn't recommend doing it like at the dinner table, because then every time the kids come to dinner, they're going to think, oh, we're going to talk about maybe something they don't want to talk about. But actually picking a day and time, whether it's, biweekly or monthly, whatever the case may be, whatever works for your family, and then sitting down and everybody can come to the table with whatever's on their mind. And it's not, meant to be a griping session, like everyone's going to complain about each other. It's like, this is important to me. Let's put a plan together for how we can make this happen. And again, allowing your child to have their voice. When I try to do maybe agreements with this is another thing. So it's family meetings, and then it's like writing clear agreements, contracts. Okay, these are the chores you're going to do, and you've agreed on them because you've picked some of them. Okay. And if they don't get done, this is what we've decided will be the results. So collectively doing those clear agreements, writing those clear agreements and agreeing to them. And then being willing to be flexible within the boundaries or the agreements that you set, because things come up. There was recently one of the graduates on one of my pages, one of my groups, was writing something about bath time, like bedtime she had a younger son. And so she was saying, how would you handle this? We have to be in, he's got to be in bed by 7:30, let's say, right? And so bath time he's got X amount of time for bath time, and then we'd read a story, and then he goes to bed. Well, the son wanted to stay in the bath longer. So then she was basically saying, well, then, the choice is, if you want to stay in the bath, okay, then you don't get to have story time. Well, it shouldn't be something that necessarily that you're going to take away. Let him enjoy the bath. Kids grow up so fast, and then there's no longer bath time. And then you look back and say, oh, I wish there was bath time. I wish there was story time again. But anyway, let them, figure out a way to be flexible within the time frame or the boundaries. Okay, so we'll read a shorter story tonight, or we only read one story instead of 3 stories. But don't take something away. Figure out a creative way to stay within the boundaries, but then also the child not feel like they're penalized for anything.
Yeah.
Don't be too rigid.
No.
Yeah, flexibility is super. Pivoting and flexibility have become like my favorite words.
These things, and you said like my program. So clearly there are services and other items that you provide in your mechanisms in your coaching. I just wanted, before you share maybe a little bit more on what they are, but I was thinking, the family team meetings. I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate. I call State of the Union in couplehood, and my brother and I and my nephew are right in podcasting. Like, we still need to create a place of check-in. Are we? And then our intention is our vision similar, right? It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but we've got to know that we're all in alignment. And I love that idea, and that you spoke into that today. So excited me that I really encourage our listeners to look that up. But I heard you say that there's an agreement, there's an agenda, and there's even at the table, everyone gets to have a voice.
And even when they're little, like, don't think it has to only start when they're like 10 and up, let's say. Even when they're little, find a way to engage your child. Well, what do you think? Even when they're little, then they all of a sudden, I get to say something. And man, that really goes a long way with their self-confidence. A long way.
Yeah. They're also being invited. What I hear you saying is they're being invited. Their voice is being invited into the space. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's really important that they get that message over and over. It's like it builds their own muscle, so to say.
Absolutely. Their neural pathways, then they know they're, they matter.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And, you've shared with us how your parenting has changed. Clearly, you're checking yourself through your own work as you peel away for others. You're kind of touching base with yourself. How does that, is there any other areas that you would say you've revealed, or are you even learning as you're in this place of, I don't know what even a parent mastermind is, by the way. I don't know what a mommy mind is or a daddy mind is. What does that bring for you as the professional and as the parent in those spaces?
Yeah, so I have, this might be a good time. I have a Facebook group called Real Talk Parenting. And, it varies. We have like lighthearted laughs and, topic discussions and things like that. And sometimes I'll just do inspirational thoughts or tools or tips that I've learned, weekday wisdom, things like that. And it's all built on what's going on in my life really as a parent, or maybe what I've heard when I've been coaching another parent or another child. So it's all inspirational from what's happening around me. So, I don't know. Does that answer your question, or that wasn't enough?
Sure. Yeah. No, it's never about enough. You didn't have enough that you wanted to say on that, because what is that difference? What is parent minding or
okay? So I've got Real Talk. Okay, so I've got Real Talk Parenting, which is a Facebook page, and a Facebook page where parents can engage. Then I have Master Momming and Dadding. So that's a mastermind group. That's if you really want to take the conversation next level. We meet twice a month on a Zoom call. It's usually a more intimate group of people who really, really want to go deeper with the work, that really want to just continue peeling back their own layers. And then in turn, obviously, you show up better and better as a parent when you're more in tune to why you do what you do, and you really want to explore it. A lot of parents want like a quick fix, and that's okay. I also offer pop-up parenting, so parent coaching. So you like that, Mark? Pop-up. Yeah. So if they just want to work on one topic, maybe screen time or something like that, we can meet just one-on-one on Zoom, and we'll just work on that one topic. Sometimes parents really want to be coached extensively, so they'll sign up for like a 10-week, or a 13-week program to really dive deep into all of it. And then, of course, I have my Coaching Kids with Love, which is just simply with children, whether it's one-on-one or I can do siblings. I really prefer one-on-ones. I've tried doing siblings before. I can do it, and I think it's most effective when it's individual. And then if there's something specific, again, that we want to work on between the siblings, then we can meet, with them together.
And peeling back that onion with the parents, is there some place that or some questions or something you would have our listeners can maybe ask themselves self-reflectively about parenting? I love, like you said before, am I coming from fear? Right?
Right.
Like that's a great self-reflective. Quick question: is there some others that would have them be in touch with how am I showing up, or what's the tool I'm picking? Like, where's my come from?
Yeah. So there's also like, of course, most people have heard about reaction versus responding. So are you reacting in that moment that you are having something going on with your child, or are you responding? And how to regulate yourself first before so it's taking that pause, really being mindful. And it's not always easy. Trust me. You just want to like react because that's your automatic and that's your go-to, but it takes practice, really taking that breath before you respond to what's happening, whatever the situation is. So that's a big one, really, really. And then adding play. Oh my gosh, this is like, once our kids reach a certain age, all of a sudden there's no more play. All of a sudden it's like we're so serious with them. And then they don't want us to be serious, so they just look at us like we're just trying to control them. So adding play. I did a video the other day on my group page about kids. I was coaching a woman, and she has a 12-year-old daughter, and she said, I just can't take how much attitude she has in her voice every time she talks to me. It's like this thing. And I was like, I honestly, the tween and teens, I don't even think they realize half the time how they sound. So we have a choice as a parent. Do we want to take it personally? That's not going to get us anywhere. Most parents think it's a lack of respect if the child sounds a certain way. Again, I don't think they really even realize they sound like that. So in that moment, can you just let it go? Can you just not take it personally and let it go and just figure out what's going on and handle the situation without talking about the attitude or the sound of the voice? Or can you be playful about it? Like, tone check. I'll do that with my son Journey, like tone check, and we laugh, or find ways to play versus being so serious. And you'll end up with a completely different scenario. But we lose it when the kids get older. We stop playing for some reason. And it's such a shame because it's really a wonderful way, a creative way to communicate with your child.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate the pause that you just spoke into also, and the attitude check, right? Not taking personally. That's like one of the 4 agreements, right? We definitely get to live like that as a parent. But the agreement, even with ourselves or our kids, that maybe the agreement is I'm going to pause, or I'm going to walk away, but I'm not gaslighting you. I'm not walking away from you.
Right.
I know I'm not effective in this moment. So when that happens, like, and now I'm thinking about even what you just said, it'd be like, parent timeout, or right, like we're gonna do a pause here on this, because you're right. It's not like I'm ready to have a new way of responding in this moment, and I really love that you presence that for us.
Yeah, sometimes you have to walk away, or I would definitely tell the child if you're going to do that, because if then they might start thinking,
Yep.
Where that could go, what rabbit hole that could go down, but, or have a, again, being playful, have like a code, like, I don't know, like, okay, you're doing that thing, so, and each parent and the child could have their own little hand signal, to kind of diffuse the situation. Yeah.
But there's an attunement that is. Right? Like, I only know what this code means. Like, right? That moment we're attuned, even though we may not be getting along, there's a connection that, that signal gives to each other. That secret passcode.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is bringing up something for me. When you said attunement, do you share this with parents? But I feel like parents need to be in tune with their kids. And I think a lot of it comes from not being in tune. Even what you said about, can you not take it seriously? Well, are you seeing where the children is having maybe a feeling, the child's having a feeling, and you want to personalize the feeling instead of seeing them? So do you go over this with parent? It just came up for me. It's that parents need to be in tune with the kid. It's not the kid being in tune with the parent.
Absolutely. I can even a good story I can share about that is even between spouses. right? So Journey's dad loves technology. He loves a computer. He's the first to introduce a new game or play the same game that our son is playing. And all Journey's life, I've been fighting that computer, reading articles about, how they will, it affects their lack of attention, it affects their attention span, things like that. And then one day, several years ago, I read an article that said, the jobs that your kids will have not even been created yet. And it was a technology column. And I was like, whoa. I'm living in yesterday. It's just like when our parents didn't want us on TV for so, watching TV for so long, because God forbid something was going to happen to us. It's a different generation. If you're not in tune to the generation, you're just going to keep going to what you know, and you will never be in sync with each other. It's a completely different generation. And finding ways to speak their language is really what a parent needs to do in order to be successful.
Yeah, because they're walking into a different world, technological world, that if you try and hold technology away from them, it's going to be more, we think it's in our lives now. It's not even a piece of what it's going to be in the future.
Another thing I learned that's really important for parents is that they now have esports as scholarships for colleges.
What's that mean?
Oh, yeah. I want to hear that.
Electronics.
My son's in high school right now.
Yeah. So if you're a good gamer, or they're calling it esports. So you can get a scholarship if you're really good gaming or coding or whatever your thing is, your shtick is on the technology. Some colleges are offering scholarships. So rather than fight them on something they love, it's a hobby like any other hobby. The trick is keeping it, in balance. Like if a kid loves to play baseball or they love to do dance, they're not going to do that 10 hours a day. So it's the same thing for technology. Yes, you want them to enjoy their hobby, and they get to be in balance, and it can be challenging.
It's funny, even sports has shifted. Now they play baseball all year round. It's like,
oh, yeah.
In my day, they used to, you had a little season, and now it's like a whole, but I like the balance, yeah.
Yeah, and the balance is tricky. It's tricky because we're all on technology. So if he's saying, well, even if I'm on a coaching call, but I'm still on technology, it's like, well, he doesn't want to decipher between why I'm on my computer and why he can't be on his computer, his being games and me being work. It doesn't matter. He sees me on my phone or on technology, and he thinks, well, this is a mixed message. Why can't I, but you can? So it's really being mindful of that. And when your child approaches you, put your phone down, put the computer down, really be present with your child.
Yeah. I really appreciate that pivot, though, that you shared about the article, right? Because your worldview, your history, your opinion was shaping and molding how you wanted him to show up. And until you could have a shift in your perspective, it couldn't create the space for you to have anything different than what you were having. But it's a beautiful place that you could bring that in and make your own shift and see, right, life through his experience and not just through yours. And I think that's the gift of in any relationship, actually. But I think it's much more called forth in parenting. Calls that forth. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
Wow.
Well, we should create some kind of challenge out of this. I mean, how parents maybe could step in or create this space, or I don't know what it looks like, but we can co-create it right now. I don't know if you have an idea.
Maybe parents have their own tips. I don't know. Could they share any tips that maybe have been successful in their journey?
This would be a different.
That's great.
This would be a different. Yeah, why not?
On the challenge.
Parents can share on the challenge, so parents can help each other on this. They'll post it on Facebook, but okay, yeah.
Tip how they pivot.
how they pivoted,
How they
what
pivot.
things they found out, how, like you shared when you walk up reading an article, it shifted you. Like, like parents share your tips. Because you know what? We all don't have all the tips. And if we
Of
share
course
them,
not.
we
Yeah.
learn.
That's why it takes a village, right?
Yeah, this
We
is
all
great.
learn from each other.
Instead of challenging a different, this is like the pivot of a challenge.
That's
what
right.
a pivot-
Parent pivot challenge. There you go.
I love it.
Wonderful.
yeah.
So we we're going to ask our listeners to share on our Facebook page, the BTO podcast, tips on how you pivot as a parent. And, Mark and I will put something on there too. So we walk the walk all the time.
Yeah. And I just don't want, if you're not a parent, you could be an aunt, a godchild, whatever. How maybe you can share in that too, because I don't want to leave everybody. Everybody can bring how they pivoted with a child in their lives anywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So we're gonna shift our conversation into some really quick, fast fire questions where we ask you and just what comes to mind.
Uh-oh.
So,
Okay.
so,
Let me get ready.
so Gia, how do you define love?
Whoa, that's not a quick question.
I told you they get a little deeper.
Oh my God. I'll just say I define it as a gift. A gift.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow. So who in your life influenced you the most and why?
Wow. I would say Journey's dad, Holiday, has been probably the greatest influence for me because he challenges me to grow and continue really getting out of my comfort zone. We do it with each other. We do it for and with each other. And he's quite the inspiration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you have two favorite books, you're like, these are life changers, or these are like my two sacred books, what would you suggest or share with our listeners?
Yeah, I would say definitely The Four Agreements, completely life changing for me. Being impeccable with your word, not making assumptions. That was a big one. And again, quickly as parents, we assume a lot. We assume we know what our child is thinking or feeling or going to say. We have no idea. Not taking it personally, and always doing your best. So those are the four agreements in a nutshell. But the book is and was life-changing for me. The second one I think would probably be Scream-Free Parenting. There was one line in that book that resonated with me. Like I could have only read that one line and it would have been enough to make the book worth reading and purchasing. And that was when we are, and you don't have to scream at your child for this book to be impactful. But if you do tend to raise your voice, the line was, when you are upset with your child, it's because you are looking for them to fulfill an emotional need that you're having. You're expecting them to fulfill an emotional need that you're having. And I was like, oh my gosh, how can I ever expect my son to fulfill my need that he doesn't even know I'm having? I don't know. For me, that was just huge, but it's a good book.
Yeah. That line was a mic dropper.
I was
That
going
is
to bang my head on the mic.
That's like, boom. That landed.
Yeah.
How do you embody or own your truth every day?
Well, my first thought is when I look in my son's eyes. But always being in the question, always just reflecting on how I want to show up in this world.
Yeah. And as we honor this time together, is there any last pieces of wisdom, tips that you want to share with our listeners and us?
Well, I could talk all day long about this stuff. I think when you are parenting, and I'll go back to as your kids grow up and you start having less and less patience, shall we say, if you can look at them through the eyes of, see them as babies, see them as young children, and then I'm going to cry. Then you see them differently. In that moment, even if you're upset or you're trying to get your point across or whatever, if you just look at them like as they were when you held them, it's a different perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful way to end this connection today. And I always, no matter what our age is, we still have an inner child too.
Yeah.
So there's, what do we want that inner child to experience and hear from us in this moment? So thank you for that reminder, that tender moment.
That's it, tenderness and sweetness.
It really is. And for me, it's always a gift to connect and have a way to create that connection with you, Gia. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing the space
Appreciate
and time. Yep. And we will be giving our listeners ways to connect with you and reach you on social media and through your website. So
love to have them.
Yeah, thank you. And we're going to take this out for today as we all end with a little tear in our eyes and honoring the sacredness of life, right? Mm-hmm. And children are one of those reminders at all times. And so...
my son's over here, so I'm saying thank you.
Yeah.
Blessings.
Yes. So, thank you for listening to Break Through the Ordinary podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and our deep dive into connection, parenting, self-reflection, so you can live your extraordinary life. If you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and share it with others on social media. And to catch the latest on our show, follow us at the BTO Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.